This is the case of a leadership transition in corporate finance. I'm Kevin Wynn, and along with Leslie Queen, Sharice Sohm, and Doc Dillard, we present to you an assessment of Jake, the newly promoted leader, and his team at the financial office of Divisional Plastics, Inc. Our agenda is outlined here on the slide. Background: the newly appointed finance leader quickly finds he has his hands full with a feisty cast of team members who object to more than his choice of donuts and creamer. There are a total of 12 team members in the department, but we feature 6 main characters: Kelsey, Gabriel, Austin, Paige, Elliot, and Tyler. The central problem: weak organizational culture and leadership equates to poor group dynamics and performance. And we saw examples of that in the case study on page 20, an issue with the spreadsheet, on page 23 with the firing of a previous employee, and also with the example of the donuts on page 19 and how some of the employees snickered. These are all examples of how the team lacked group cohesion and accountability. They lacked clear expectations and role definition, and also poor communication and conflict resolution skills. There were also secondary problems at the organizational level. We saw examples of no trust on page 21. Tyler will send his work using a separate template. Also, there were team problems. Several team members did not understand how to use the budgeting template. And there were individual problems with Jake as the leader, needing employee buy-in, and other examples.
The next thing our group chose to do was to analyze the Divisional Plastics organization as a whole. And first, we're going to look at the organizational structure. If you look at the social structure within the organization, it has both formal and informal communication. It also has both formal and informal organizational chart and structure, because there is a specific structure of who's in charge and whose duties fall where, but then there's also some workarounds in those that we see by different employees. The goals of this organization is to create financial reports for Lauren, who is in charge. She is the main person, the board of directors, and the CEO. The goal is also to manage departmental budgets through a series of different steps and processes. You have several of the participants listed here in the organization, and we've covered some of these in a previous slide. You have technology used by this organization, and these mainly are things that you would see in an office to accomplish computing, financial, database type tasks. And then the environment overall is a corporate environment. The next slide shows an analysis using the 4 frames by Bowman and Deal. And we feel like that Jake's current lens of the organization is a structural lens. He goes in with a positive attitude. He goes in with some tasks and goals to accomplish. He feels like he knows deadlines and how the workflow should go, but then we know his ideas are interrupted by the needs of his employees. So we feel like he does need to explore these other 3 frames. The human resources frame, he needs to get to know his employees. He needs to look at their needs. He needs to make contact with them, look for areas of growth, try to get them interested in their job and being satisfied with their job. As far as the symbolic frame, he needs to prepare the employees for a meaning and a purpose to their job, knowing that if you do this part, another part is accomplished. He needs to help people feel significant in their job, knowing that they're making a difference, being that motivator for them. And then we also feel like he needs to explore the political lens within the organization, kind of getting to know those unofficial groupings, maybe who eats lunch with one another, or this one person is always the person people go to and give information to. So we feel like he needs to be able to see his organization through all of these different lenses. Our group also chose to analyze the followers within the organization using the Curfey-Rolig model. And you can see our chart, we've analyzed the characters that were mentioned, and it looks like Jake has a lot of criticizers in the group. And you can see there the different comments that they make in the case study. He has one person that says they'll do whatever he needs them to do. So kind of overall, we feel like he's going to have to work hard to be able to inspire and motivate and move these criticizers from that area of the chart over to being self-starters. And some ways that he could do that might be using a servant leadership style or transformational leadership style. And then we also wanted to put in the team strengths. And this is kind of just interesting to note because the team generally sees the members as hardworking, and the team has a great deal of respect from other people in the company. But just noting that the team themselves actually created this list of strengths. So I think that's kind of interesting how they came up with those.
In order to truly unpack what is occurring with this team, we need to first look at the 5 dysfunctions of a team that was presented by Lencioni. The 2 main areas that I'll be focusing on today would be absence of trust and inattention to details. With the absence of trust, you see an unwillingness to be vulnerable with the group, not genuinely being open to your mistakes. On page 20, we see a debacle with the team when Jake presents Kelsey with a task to facilitate a spreadsheet deliverable to the team. Almost instantly, the team reacts in objections towards this idea based on their prior experience with Kelsey. They do not believe that Kelsey is capable. They present this by giving examples of what occurred incorrectly or wrong in the prior experience. Almost instantly, we see Kelsey react by defending herself. And in this defense, she presents the idea that they simply did not correctly follow directions. In this scenario, we see that both Kelsey and the team seem to not really own up on their mistakes. Particularly Kelsey, she doesn't necessarily own that, hey, I was over this particular activity or deliverable and it did not go over well with the team. Another factor to look at is inattention to details. Not focusing on the collective goal, but simply just doing your own thing and focusing on your priorities. We see that with this group with that same debacle with the spreadsheet. Everyone wants to do it their way instead of a streamlined process. These inattention to details will hinder the group overall. We also can look at the lens of cross-functional teams and examine the cross-functional issues that may be occurring within this team. So when we look at cross-functional teams, we think of departments and teams working together. Everyone has their particular skill set, and they're coming together so they can see different perspectives. However, due to the conflicting priorities within this team, there is a lack of cohesiveness, and it's more than likely due to the poor communication. The lack of expectations and role assignments is evident. People don't know what they are necessarily looking for or what they should be directed towards. So we see there's conflicting priorities. Another aspect to look at is conflicting measurements. What exactly is our end goal? How should I be evaluated? On page 23, in some of the reactions, we see that the team remembers or recalls a former incident, a prior incident where a team member was actually asked to leave. And they weren't quite sure of the measurements or the metrics that qualified that particular person to be exited from the team. In order to have a truly cross-functional team, everyone needs to be on the same page. So let's talk about Maxwell's laws. The three are the law of process, the law of intuition, and the law of buy-in. With the law of process, we can simply state building upon your team and self one day at a time. On page 19, we see Jake coming into this role excited, getting ready to do his usual donuts and his usual spill and speech that he normally does to conduct a team. However, this team isn't his prior team. Right from that moment, we see him met with some objections. And we learn that it doesn't, we don't build a kingdom in one day. And we can see this on page 21 as well. On page 21, we see he is still optimistic and he's hoping that the team does well, and he hears a snicker. So throughout this entire meeting, he was met with objections. With this law of process, we know that every day is a new day for you to continue to build your team and develop as a team leader. Next, we have the law of intuition, facts plus instincts. On page 19, after giving his team donuts and he was met with some objections, all right? After giving them donuts and being met with objections, we see Jake reflecting, what could I do better next time? That, to me, showcases Jake's intuition, using the law of intuition. Jake needs to continue to tap into this as he moves forward within his position. We also can look at the law of buy-in. So that's using credibility to gain support, make them believe in you. Since this is Jake's first day, he still needs to develop that buy-in, that credibility, that ethos. On page 20, when we see Jake trying to give directives, he is met with some pushback when trying to assign Kelsey that particular assignment. I still think they are somewhat receptive to Jake. However, they still didn't truly buy into that request of Jake. In order for Jake to improve, he will need to master the law of buy-in and get them to believe in his thought process and his rationale. All right, so let's discuss leadership roles and different types of leadership roles. Dubrin, pages 12 to 14, mentions Miss Berg, who has 10 different roles or types of leadership. So far, we see Jake as the spokesperson. So he's the person speaking to the consultant, he's in that leadership role, and he's the person who's putting himself out there. However, he needs to move towards being more of a strategic planner, having that overarching vision in leading his team to having that vision. And also, number 5, being a team builder, developing his team in order to carry that vision out. Once he does that, we are sure that they will be able to be more successful as a team. But these are some things to consider as we move forward to providing some solutions to his team.
Good afternoon. My name is Cherise, and I'm going to be talking with you about potential risks for Jake's team and the organization, along with solutions and a plan of action to address some of the root causes and problems related to Jake and his team. It's important for Jake to recognize that human capital is the most important resource. And so therefore, understanding that without addressing these risks, it would be problematic simply because it would affect him individually and the team collectively. Knowing this information, leadership is the thing that sets the culture for the team as well as the organization. And if we are not doing anything to mitigate these risks, then the result could be an unhealthy work culture, a reduction in productivity and performance, a loss of employee confidence within leadership, as well as high turnover because there is no buy-in from the team based on the experiences that they are having. And so consequently, if these potential risks are not addressed, then we're looking at certainly low morale, and it will affect the team as well as their overall performance. In talking about solutions, it's important for Jake to recognize that his staff is not aware of his leadership. And so part of the solution is being able to recognize that if Jake shares information and becomes transparent, it will allow staff to feel empowered, more comfortable, and hopefully identify that his situation as the leader will allow him to create an area of trust. In talking about these solutions, know that there are pros and cons to every solution that we would put forth, and our focus is recognizing and certainly focusing on the pros. So for example, with McGregor's X and Y, we would eliminate theory X because it would not be beneficial for Jake's team or his situation, in that the focus there is more on autocratic situations where they may view workers as lazy, the manager is coercive and leads to and that leads to a punitive atmosphere opposed to an inclusive or collaborative like the theory Y, whereas the leader would have an open mind, be optimistic about his employees that he is supervising, and making sure that he would recognize that they have specific insight or internal motivations that would help them to achieve the job that is being done for the organization. It's important to note that with McGregor, he also worked with Maslow in terms of hierarchy of need. Theory Y will focus on a higher order of needs, whereas Theory X would focus on a lower order of needs. In talking about the Hertzberg motivation theory, it's important to recognize that this theory is focused on job satisfaction and job dissatisfaction. As the leader for this team, it's important for Jake to understand the root cause of the dissatisfaction so that he could take appropriate measures in order to address what those are. But when we're talking about Hertzberg motivation theory, just know that there are two factor theories, and that Jake will be able to gain real good insight and understand the thing that his team is influenced by. So for example, with job satisfaction, they may be influenced by achievement, recognition, responsibility, whereas if they're dissatisfied, then they're talking about hygiene factors, where we're looking at co-worker relationships, policies, rules, and also supervision qualities. So as the team is beginning to address some of these issues, these are all viable solutions that may certainly work for Jake and his team. but it would certainly depend on Jake, his leadership approach, and how he implements those things that are being discussed. When we talk about other solutions, we do want to um, share that Johari's window would be an effective method for trying to address some of the issues related to Jake's team, simply because Johari's window is a technique that will allow Jake to better understand himself and understand how others may see him. More importantly, with Johari's window, it will also allow Jake to obtain feedback um, based on how his team sees him so that he could address anything that they may have concerns or challenges with. Just note that with Johari's window, there are several things that will address the problematic situation of the case study, and that is simply looking at self-awareness, looking at communication efforts, and just understanding that it is a system that is going to create trust if information is shared in a way and received in a way that is comforting and I guess mutually understood by all parties involved. When we talk about emotional intelligence, it's important for the staff as well as Jake to realize that when we're talking about reading a room or surveying situations, this is going to help the team see where they are and where the improvements need to happen. This allows for increased respect and mutual understanding within the team. And we also want to look at things such as, self-awareness, self-regulation, looking at the motivations of the team, certainly looking at soft skills, because emotional intelligence will allow for all of those things certainly to take place. When we're talking about the basic organizational development model, HIT provided us with a really good framework for how we can follow a process from the beginning to the end. And with Jake, it is important that he, establish from the beginning, because things appear to be in poor condition as it relates to the previous supervisor. So therefore, when we look at the basic organizational model from HIT, how we diagnose is by obtaining the information based on the experiences of both Cody and Jake, looking at a SWOT analysis, so we are able to determine the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and the threats that may be present for each member of that team. Also looking at how the team communicates, the things that they communicate. It's important to know that communication is a key element to any team's success. So therefore, being able to identify that communication is important and how we want to be able to communicate, it will be important for the team's success. Johari's window will also reveal information, and it will be revealing for both Jake as the team lead as well as those that he is leading. And so for Jake, recognizing that, leadership is about relationship, it will certainly be important for him to be able to demonstrate personality traits, consider the things that Jim Collins talked about in terms of making sure that we have the right people in the right places, making sure that we are aiming to be level 5 leaders will help Jake as well as the team. The Herzberg motivational hygiene model is another technique or system that we would use to help the team move in the direction that they want to go. And that is, of course, looking at the 2-factor models of satisfaction and dissatisfaction, understanding that those things that are motivated or motivating the particular staff members can certainly be addressed if we understand the root of what is the focus of their emotion and how they are engaging with each other when they come together as a team. when we're talking about interventions, that is the money. Certainly, when we're looking at interventions, we want to look at activities and opportunities where teams can build upon those things through experience. And so when we talk about team building, we want to certainly look at personality team building, where staff may take standardized questionnaires or assessments like the Myers-Briggs, where it shares information about their personalities, and which would also allow us to know how they may react in specific situations, understanding the motivations, of the team. We also want to look at activities where we could talk about um, outdoors or outdoor activities, where we're looking at things like ropes courses or zip lines, where the focus is on physical activity, where they engage in activities where we're looking at conflict resolution and problem solving, but they're doing it together as a team. And as they work together as a team, the hopeful outcome is that they will be able to solve problems, rely on each other, and work on or have the experience of addressing the things that have been problematic previously. When we talk about structural, we're talking about shared mission. It's important that Jake outlined for the staff, what the mission is of the team and the overarching mission of the agency, to make sure that those things are in alignment, but also focusing on what it is to identify in terms of the clear roles, making sure that for Jake, that he creates a environment in which Jim Collins called, sharing the brutal facts, and making sure that they are not concerned about whistleblowing or having some punitive action because they're sharing their thoughts and ideas that may be different from leadership. So certainly looking at the job descriptions, setting goals as a team, because that will allow for buy-in and for them to feel more comfortable with the things that are happening around them and being a part of it. And also, possibly contracting to show their commitment to these new processes and things that they're going to be agreeing to do. This is all very significant for Jake and his team because they have quite a few barriers that they need to overcome. And so when we talk about how these interventions will be laid out and how we will implement them, it will be important for Jake to certainly identify that we have baseline information so we know where we're starting at or what the start point is, and then certainly creating benchmarks to show progress or lack of progress, and making sure that we are evaluating how that goes. So certainly when we're talking about progress monitoring, we're looking at things like balanced scorecards, employee evaluations, performance evaluations, satisfaction surveys. For example, looking at satisfaction surveys so that we can administer initially, then after 6 months, and then 6 months later, so that we will have 3 evaluations, and that data will allow us to implement strategies if things are continuing not to go well, or do what is working so that things can continue to go well. Managing progress or monitoring progress will be done in several ways, and that will be a determination that is made by Jake. But one of the things that we know is that all of those opportunities will allow us to track the data that we're receiving and making sure that this information can be shared with the staff so that they will continue to be able to buy into the notion that things are improving, and it will change, hopefully, the culture of the organization. Overall, in completing this case study, our team found that, the culture was something that would certainly need to be changed and worked out. In looking at culture, we want to make sure that Jake is creating optimal performance opportunities for he and his team, we wanted to provide support and information for Jake so that he could work on the things that were identified as issues in terms of communication, collaboration, and overall professionalism. And by offering him a variety of techniques, it will allow Jake to identify what works and what does not work as he gets to know his team in terms of their strengths, weaknesses, and certainly their preferences, because that will also be important. And the goal is for the unit to be productive, feel motivated, and to achieve the goals that are set out for this established team. As we collected the information and completed research, our team identified Duprin's book in terms of leadership, HITS, Lencioni, and Maxwell, and we obtained information and techniques from all of these people that contributed to us providing a framework for Jake to improve the overall performance of his team. We thank you for allowing us to share this information, and we appreciate your attention.